I mean, we're there, but ahead of you. I mean, in the next 2 years, we are going to borrow more than has been borrowed in the whole of the history of our national debt from 1692, when it was instituted, until the present day. The next 2 years, our children are now born owing $30,000, $40,000 or more, and it will take generations to pay that off. Our credit risk has actually been downgraded as a country. We've actually lost the AAA rating that we had from the credit agencies. And the unbelievable thing with all of that going on is that we are continuing to increase spending. And this is the really unforgivable thing. But here is what I find interesting about it. I think public opinion is ahead of the politicians, certainly in the UK. I don't know how it is here. Because in Britain, there was a sense that it was politically toxic to talk about cutting money. And even my party was reluctant to talk about a reduction of any budgets. And so there was this kind of political
like a remarkable
consensus.
Parallel between the Republican Party here in control in D.C. for 8 years and did nothing.
And well, that may be the case here, but I mean, certainly in Britain, you know, the idea that you should actually cut public spending was limited to a couple of mad eccentrics like me, and I now read in an opinion poll today, 79% of the electorate. Right? And not for the first time, I would rather trust the broad mass of people than the experts.
But how can that be? And here's one of the dangers. You know, the problem with democracy is once people realize that they can vote themselves raises, they never go off the dole. And as we are nationalizing healthcare, as we're nationalizing insurance companies and fiscal companies and now car companies, we've already nationalized education, well, we're getting a lot of benefits, and it's easier for us to, quote, keep getting these benefits and not pay for them. How is it that 79% of the population says, let's cut some of those, quote, benefits?
You know, because they're not just economic creatures. They are also patriots and they're also citizens. This was the argument. Yeah, absolutely, and parents. I mean, exactly that argument is made, particularly in the Conservative Party. People say, but so many people now derive their income from the state, many more in Britain than in the US, that a political party cannot go into an election offering to cut spending because when you add the people who are on welfare to the people who are working for the government, you have such a huge chunk of the electorate, right? And my answer to that is, well, a similar argument was made against Margaret Thatcher when she was leading the opposition in the late 1970s. Then the big issue was trade union power. And people would say, because so many people are part of the unionized labor force, or are indirectly related to it, or it's the breadwinner in their family, or whatever, you cannot govern except with the consent of the trade unions. And she said, well, hang on, no, I don't believe that. I think that we can make a moral appeal to people, that we can show them that the country can't carry on like this, that we can't carry on running up these debts, we can't carry on paying for industries that can't survive. And we will appeal to them as British patriots rather than just as trade unionists. And if we do that, some people who are themselves paid up members of the syndicates will end up still voting for us. And she was absolutely right. She got a lot of support from people.
How is it that in such short time, I remember the golden Reagan Thatcher years, and as much as conservatives idealize Reagan, Thatcher was that plus a whole lot more, and that she was dealing with a much more socialized,
she was starting from a worse place.
Country where the nation, the government owned the tracks, they owned the buses, they owned the trains, they had their hands hip deep in every mill and every mine, and she was able to pull it out. How in such a short amount of time, after coming out of that malaise, did you guys get right back into it as we're falling into it now?
Well, this is the funny thing. You know, the Conservatives do their job, and then everyone feels they can afford to vote for the left. This is this pattern. And then when the money runs out, they think, OK, we need the grown-ups back, and they send for the Conservatives again. And this has been the sad cycle for us. So we'd reached absolute national calamity in the late 70s. Henry Kissinger was saying Britain is now reduced to begging and borrowing. You know, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal saying, so long Britain, it was nice knowing you. You know, we had power cuts, we had food shortages, we were becoming like a third world country. And people understood that there was a need for something different. And I think we've reached that stage again. And it's unfortunate that a new generation had to go through that experience before we learnt the lesson again. But at least I think our Conservatives are now getting there. And I'm quite interested in the parallels here, because I mean, you know, I'm a British Conservative politician. But if I were here, I would be a strong Republican. I have a more uncomplicated loyalty, I think, to the GOP than I have sometimes to my own party. But I think they have made some serious mistakes recently. the thing
they
that,
being
the U.S. Republican Party. I'm just saying. I'm saying this as a benign trend. But let me put it the other way around. The strength of the Republican Party, the way in which they went from being in a situation in the middle of the 20th century where they were in structural permanent opposition and where they could only win the presidency if they fielded a sort of neutral Ike-type candidate, the way they went from there to winning all the time was they became a popular, low-tax, anti-government states' rights party, a party that was against the elites, in favor of the maximum dispersal of power. They went from being the party of New England, preppy, country club, old money, to being the Sun Belt popular party, and they started winning. Now, what worries me...
as soon as they got into full power, I was amazed, once we had the White House, the Congress, and the Senate, how quickly we started spending. Matter of fact, under the George Bush years, the size of government grew at a faster rate than when Johnson was president.
And that is the problem.
And what shows me is that politicians are still politicians, that our guys did what they did, only more so.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about only more so. I mean, I think, you wait and see what these guys are doing before you write them off. But yeah, I think that's right. It was very difficult. Looking at the recent elections, when I said to myself, okay, what are the big reasons now to vote Republican? This has now become a party of massive federal spending, of federal debt. It's a party that is contravening states' rights on a whole series of issues, including which I thought was bizarre, the marriage, the same-sex union thing. I mean, how on earth is that a Washington prerogative rather than a local one? It had become a party of external protectionism and steel tariffs, and then at the end it became a party of nationalizations and bailouts. And I was thinking, well, how can anyone then make a basic conservative case for voting for this party? I tell you, the one thing that Obama has done is he has united the Republicans around a better policy, because 100% of them voted against his stimulus package, whereas a lot of them had voted for the Bush stimulus package. So he maybe the recovery is beginning.
Let me say this as part of the Republican rebuilding. It's my sense that as a minority, it's very easy for Republicans to get together and say, we're low taxes, we're low spending, we're states' rights, but they couldn't pull it off when they were in charge. And now they're going to have to say, well, believe me, this time we mean it. And I think the only way they're going to be able to do that is if they do what alcoholics do in a 12-step program. When they step up and say, here's what we did wrong. Please, we're atoning for our sins. Please accept our apology. And specifically say, when we voted to nationalize more of education, when we voted for the energy bill, when we voted for McCain-Feingold, when we voted for the massive Medicare entitlement bailouts. I mean, just remarkable stuff.
Can I just say one thing on that, though, because I'm not sure it's true that this invariably happens. You were here at the time and I wasn't. I was watching from afar, but I seem to remember that in the immediate aftermath of the Gingrich victory, large parts of the contract with America were implemented. And I remember watching that from the UK thinking, this is extraordinary. People are going to have to get used to the idea that there is such a thing as a politician who can keep his promise. And the centerpiece of the contract with America, as I understood it, was here was a group of people promising to take power, not in order to snatch at the levers of state control, but rather to devolve it, to give it away. And I think that's really inspired me. I mean,
there was another angle of that you really need to take a look at. The contract was a terrific sales ploy, and in fact, it was 100% followed in that they promised an up or down vote on these issues. And they had up and down votes on those issues. Many of them passed, a few of them failed. But really, what took down the Democratic Congress was a gun rights issue. When under Bill Clinton they passed a so-called assault weapons ban, and a lot of Democratic-leaning gun owners said, what? And they came over to the Republican side, which is why I think you'll see Nancy Pelosi not take the lead on anti-gun legislation until there's some big populist and terrible tragedy.
Returning to your point about, why do they all end up the same?